Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Radio OPAC, a weekly conversation series occurring Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time over Facebook Live on the Ohio Prison Arts Connection Facebook page. The day is August 21st, 2020, and a special welcome goes out to all of our audience members who are seeing this inside a correctional institution. And OPAC is helping to facilitate these conversations via DVD copies shared with several Ohio prisons. So special welcome to those guests. My name is Jared Small, and I am on the steering committee of the Ohio Prison Arts Connection, which is a group of stakeholders whose mission is to connect the arts to those who are justice involved. Thanks so much for joining us today. And a special welcome goes out to my guest, Dr. Christopher Dum.
Hello.
Dr. Dum, hello, how are you, sir?
I'm doing terrific. How are you?
I'm also terrific, thanks. Dr. Dum, you're an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at Kent State University and co-founder of the ID13 Prison Literacy Project and author, among other publications, of the award-winning book, Exiled in America, Life on the Margins in a Residential Motel, which is published by Columbia University Press. Chris's work focuses on the intersections of inequality, social control, and the criminal justice system, and has implemented a number of writing and literacy projects at a couple different Ohio-based institutions, including Grafton Correctional, Lake Erie Correctional, as well as Federal Correctional Institution Elkton, FCI Elkton, all three of which, as I mentioned, are here in Ohio. So today we're going to talk a bit with Chris about his role in providing a voice, an outlet, and a platform for incarcerated individuals to express themselves through writing and literacy. So Dr. Dum, we appreciate you joining us today. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could just start off by telling us just a bit about who you are. You know, what should people know about you and what you stand for and what you do?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I think first and foremost, I'm an adopted child. I was born in Korea, and I was adopted by a lovely family here in America. And I think for me, having been in the foster care system when I was younger, just reminds me that there's so much in a sense that's out of our control, and that we're all connected in very important ways, and we can do a lot to help other people in our lives. And so I try to bring that through my work. I view sort of my role as a professor and an activist is very interconnected. I don't think that you can really study inequality in the criminal justice system without then taking those findings and advocating for change and advocating for the people who are affected by that. So for me, when I was younger, I wanted to be a police officer, and honestly, I've sort of changed and reversed that in many ways. And so I think, to me, I'm now more focused sort of on this critical aspect of the system and sort of analyzing why it exists, and how it's set up to control people, and how it sort of contributes to, and how it's used by people in power in society, and trying to sort of break down those walls and amplify the voices of people affected by the system. So that was a sort of long-winded rambling thing, but I view myself as a very much someone who cares deeply about academic research, but also really the people at the heart of that research as well.
I am really struck by what you mentioned about, your role as professor or academic is directly in alignment with your role as kind of a social activist, but you're doing much more than research, but you're practicing what you preach, and obviously it takes quite a bit of work. And one piece of your work that I'd like to touch on is the formation of the ID13 Prison Literacy Project. I know that name of the project falls under a couple different institutions. You may have done some things here and there, but can you talk just about that project writ large? What did you set out to accomplish with the Prison Literacy Project, and why?
Yeah, so it came about, I was working with a friend of mine named Hallie Niederman, who's a Kent State English student in the English department, a doctoral student, really interested in these kinds of issues as well. She's actually in Beirut right now, teaching at the American University of Beirut, and she, um, the librarian from the Lake Erie Correctional Institution reached out to Kent State and said there's these guys and they have their writing group and a reading group, and they just would really like some people from the outside to come in and help sort of offer some expertise in those groups. And Hallie was like, "Hey, you're interested in these issues. Do you want to come help out?" So that was in summer 2016, and we went in and we met with the guys and we basically said, "Well, what do you want from us?" That's sort of always been the mantra. Is like we exist at the pleasure of your invitation. So we're not there to shove stuff in their faces and say this is how you have to do it. It's like, what do you want, and we will do what we can to meet those interests. And they said, well, we want to learn about writing and publishing, and so we started holding these workshops in there and making chapbooks. And we had 2 students from the NEO MFA program come in to help run writing workshops, and they produced our first chapbook. Then we created a website, and the goal is basically to put their work out there and share that with the public as much as possible to give them this platform. So that was at Lake Erie, and then we were able to, through actually a great staff member, Eric Gardenhire at Grafton, we were just able to go there and start working with another group, Poetic Companions, who just focus mainly on poetry there. So again, it's sort of focusing on, okay, well, what do you want in this particular place? Like what we did here doesn't necessarily have to transport over at all. We can do something different. And our goal has just been to find groups that want some sort of assistance and to meet that need, and really to just blast the work out there to the public and let their experiences speak for themselves.
Wow, that's really powerful. I love what you said about, you go into partnering with these institutions, not from what you're seeking to do yourself, but attempting to serve the needs of those specific institutions. And I know between Lake Erie and Grafton, every institution seems like its own island, so to speak. And I would suspect have very different needs given the populations that they serve. So it's interesting to me that you say that, you go with that mindset of we're here to help you, tell us what your objectives are and not the other way around. And I have to suspect that's probably really key to some of the partnerships that you've established, right? You mentioned Eric Gardenhire. These relationships, I feel like they're really special with what you're doing. So that's brilliant. I know that you've done a little bit of work with FCI Elkton, which is the Federal Correctional Institution in Elkton, Ohio, the only federal correctional institution in the state. And I'm hoping you can speak a bit more about that project that you've been doing somewhat recently, actually. But the project itself seems fairly unique because you mentioned that it's all done totally remotely, that you haven't even stepped foot inside of the institution. Can you talk more about your collaboration with FCI Elkton? What did you do? And how did you get this kind of synergistic collaboration with people who you've never met before?
Yeah, and sort of the FCI Elkton thing happened way before COVID too. So this was just sort of a remote collaboration, sort of by sort of logistically. So one thing, there's an organization, Kent Books to Prisoners, which exists at Kent State University. It basically is exactly what it is. People may have heard about this. So in the mailings that they send out, they've been putting in some ID-13 chapbooks. So someone at FCI Elkton got a mailing from Books to Prisoners that happened to have a chapbook in there. And the guys in there were like, wow, this is really cool. It'd be awesome if we could have one of these. So one of the writers in there, Jason Kaler, wrote me a letter, actually. And was like, hey, we've never met before, but there's a bunch of guys here who want to do this writing, and we're hoping that maybe we can work together and do it. I'm not sure if you guys can actually get in at the moment as volunteers because things have to be approved and things like that. And I was like, well, you know what? I mean, we can just do something where we send pieces back and forth otherwise. Like we don't have to, with technology these days, we don't actually have to get in there. It'd be great, of course, but if that's, sort of a barrier, let's not, let it stop us. So on his end, so it sort of requires these sort of, organizers on each end, right? So he was just kind of this great taskmaster, inspirational guy, who people really respected and could work with. And, he got a group of guys together and said, okay, we're going to do this thing. Get me your pieces together. We'll set like a deadline to have stuff, and then we will mail it to you, or mail it, and also through Core Links, sort of the electronic service as well. So they were able to mail stuff and then electronically send some things. So we were able to print those off then. There were some students at Kent State University who were interested in giving feedback for the guys, because that's what they really wanted. They wanted these second eyes on the pieces with some, to give some feedback. So we would print off the pieces, send them to the students. The students would take a look at them and write handwritten comments on them about what they thought. And then we packaged those up and mailed them back in, and the guys got them, and then actually sent another round saying, okay, I think this is great, or you asked about this word here, so this is actually what it means. So we had another round of exchange, and we got them back. And then a good friend of mine, Bank George, who's been involved with ID13 for a while, and does all of our chapbook design, put together this awesome chapbook. One of the guys from Elkton actually drew the cover art for the chapbook, and he mailed it to me, and then we scanned that, put it together. So yeah, this real sort of just like, we're just gonna get together and do this, and sort of with planning and some luck with the mail, we'll make it work.
Well, it's so fascinating, because a lot of these things have been self-initiated from the inside, that you've got a group of folks who reach out, who are looking for critique of their work, thoughts. That to me is really interesting, that they kind of find you almost, or Kent State, and then you kind of take it from there, which is interesting. And then there is some reliance on the mail, which you never know what you're going to get with that. So I imagine that must have expanded the timeline a bit. I mean, what was that like, working with the mail system? Were there large gaps between when you receive something versus when you send it out, and did that impede the process? Do you think it actually helped the process at all, or was it a positive?
It actually went pretty smoothly. There weren't any situations where we're like, man, it's been so long and we haven't heard. We're just so worried. Like, things actually, like, we're able to send it back in. And it was just, you don't get much mail that's actually very exciting these days, I feel. Right. So actually, it was kind of like this nice gift, like getting, oh, this is the stuff. And I think, short of being able to be there talking with someone face to face, to me, and I was sort of adamant, like, having the, printing something out and writing comments by hand, right? And then being able to get that to people. I think it's like when you get like a handwritten letter, it's like, wow, someone took the time. And I think having that to show that someone's taking this time to go through was just really, and getting this original piece of art through the mail too for the cover was just like.
Really special.
Yeah, it's sort of, I think, in a way, because it's not to be like too weirdly literal, but this is something, this is like a real physical object, right? That's been touched by this other person who you can't meet, but is still getting to you, right? And here's just this something that was drawn by somebody. This is this real thing that they produced, and now you're holding it in their hands and they're contributing it. So I think that was actually, it's just sort of like, now thinking about it too, like just a really powerful thing to be able to touch and see that sort of stuff and then put that together.
Absolutely. And I'm struck by the fact that all of this was really beginning before the pandemic. So it makes me wonder, is this kind of the future of, arts and correctional programming, relying on mail and handwritten notes, and not so much in person, but what can be done from a distance? And it's interesting to me that, you've been doing this for a while now.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance and sort of this opportunity to, like, let's get ahead of the next crisis that would prevent us from going in. And so we can say, yeah, like, we can deliver all these things in all these different ways, and it just really sort of then expands the opportunities, of what you can do if you're thinking, okay, well, how can we tackle this if we can't go inside? What other outside the box tools can we think about using?
I love it, expanding our thinking and the opportunities that come along with it. That's brilliant. just a quick pause. If anyone's joining us for on the Facebook stream, this is Radio OPAC. I am here today with Dr. Christopher Dum, who is the co-founder of the ID13 Prison Literacy Project. So if you'd like to, we'd love to invite you to a talkback after this interview. We will meet with another participant in the literacy project to hear some of his thoughts on the talkback. But for now, I want to shift pace. Oh, excuse me, but the link to join the talkback is below in the Facebook comments. So look out for that Zoom link in the Facebook comments and you can join the talkback when it begins. But Chris, shifting gears briefly, I know I mentioned in my intro with you that you had a book published called Exiled in America, Life on the Margins in a Residential Motel, which is separate, of course, from your work on the ID13 Literacy Project. But can you tell us a bit about this book? What were some of the discoveries? I think your research focuses on a lot of different things, but this one's particularly interesting. Can you tell us anything about the book and maybe how we might be able to get our hands on a copy?
Yeah. So the book came out of my dissertation that I was working on back in 2012 and 2013. And I was really just sort of struck by the idea that people experiencing residential stability, many of them were living in motels. And like, from my upbringing, that's not something I'd really thought about, right, as something that people will go through. And so the book, really the goal was to spend a year at this one particular motel to examine sort of what role this motel played in people's lives and what the culture was that they created and how they interacted with each other. Like, how are people there surviving? And sort of, I guess I see sort of the connection with this and ID13 is like, I'm just really interested in the power of people's stories, right? When you sit down and talk, like, obviously you are too, because you're doing this Radio OPAC thing, right? I mean, so this amazing thing that we can learn so much and gather so much about the world just by talking to people and listening to them. And so the purpose of the book was to sit down and really look at, where are people coming from to end up there. And so one really interesting is, this motel had a number of code violations and things like that. If you saw pictures of it or read your description, you'd be like, wow, this is not a great place to live. But sort of depending on where you're coming from really sort of affects your view of the motel, right? I mean, there are people coming from shelters where there's this one couple, they had to live separately in two homeless shelters, and then they were in this motel, and they had this room together, and so they're like, this is a wonderful safe haven. This is something we didn't have before. And they would talk about, this is my home, and I cry on the thought of losing it because this is all I have. But then other people would be like living in apartments or something like that, and they would lose a job, and then they'd have to go to the motel, and they view it as, oh, we have to go here, and they sort of, make some more excuses about why they were there. And it was just like, oh, this is just sort of a stopgap thing. Like, it was a step down for them. So really sort of the context of, where you were before really determines what you think about the motel and how it plays out. And just another, to me, the most amazing thing, the best thing about being there was there are these people who really don't have a lot, obviously. You've fallen on some hard times if you're living in a motel, but there's so much community and helping people, people who are down on their luck and who don't have a lot already, like using these meager resources to help other people and banding together and sharing food and other things like that, sticking up for each other, different conflicts. It was just really just seeing these sparks of hope and solidarity was really, just really powerful to me. And I, made some great friendships there. People who I, am, so fortunate to have them open up to me and allow me to see their lives. And sort of just the overall saddest thing is that at the end, after, like a few months after I left the motel, it actually got shut down. Like, someone fell through a floor, and so the state came and said, wow, there's just too many code violations here. We're gonna have to shut this place down, And so they kicked people out in like the dead of winter. This is upstate New York in like January, and it's, the wind chill's freezing cold and people are getting evicted. I think so it just drives home the inequality that we face in society, and just sort of the things that we need to keep fighting for people, who don't have so much power. And, things are happening, all over the country, actually. There are motels like this all over the place.
Thank you for sharing. Powerful, and the power of a narrative and allowing folks to tell their narrative or their story, kind of one of the thread lines I'm pulling on here, Chris. So it's much appreciated. And you know, thank you for sharing your work with us and your life's passion. It's like you said, it's almost now more important than ever to be listening and to actually really try to get to understand people and allowing them the ability to share themselves with the world. Just so important. So thank you so much for sharing. And
Thank you.
at the end of all of our Radio OPAC segments, we usually ask for our guest to participate in a moment of reflection, which is an opportunity for the audience to enjoy some works of art furnished by or created by our guests and reflect as we take a moment to wrap up. So Chris, I'd love it if you could share with us some artwork that's meaningful to you and maybe just a little bit of background on what you want to share.
Yeah. So I'm going to read two pieces here. So we've produced a number of chapbooks through ID 13. And so this first piece I'm going to read comes from a summer 2018 chapbook, and this is just like the cover there. This is the cover was drawn by one of the guys inside. This piece is called My Window, and it's by Franklin, and he was a military veteran, and I think he's been released, but I have not heard from him since then. But this is a really great piece that he has, and it's called My Window. Watching the sun and the moon exchange places in the sky, as the seasons and years come and go, the earth coming alive and fading away, another season or year passing just for another to take its place. First there is spring, with the budding of the flowers and trees, the grass turning from pale to lively green, new life begins. Next comes summer, the flowers now in full bloom, birds singing in the trees, along with a new hive of bees, the sounds and smells of the season in the air. Then comes fall, vibrant colors everywhere, stealing nature's harvest, the cooling of my little patch of earth. Now it's winter's turn, a time when everything seems to slow. The snow covers the land, Earth's way of taking a much-needed rest. Along with these wonderful sights and events, watching not only the seasons but years pass by my window, seeing my reflection in the window's glass, aging as each season and year fades away. So that was by Franklin. And I should mention, all of our chapbooks and pieces are on our website, id13project.com. You can download the chapbooks for free and distribute them just at your leisure. Everything is there to share. So this next piece here is by a writer named E.L. And I mentioned him too because we are very fortunate to have a relationship with a small publishing house called Bleak House Publishing, run by Professor Robert Johnson from American University. And so we've actually put out a book collection of poetry by this writer from Lake Erie. It's called Behind These Fences. If you go on Amazon, you can order it. If you just Google or go on Amazon and look up Behind These Fences with the initials EL. That's coming out very soon, so you can pre-order it now. I'm just so excited to have his work in there. He's just a terrific writer. And this is sort of a more serious one, but what just really strikes me. So this one's called Rock Bottom. I rode my rusty off-brand bike along the unmaintained back road of the ghetto I called my neighborhood. Trees overgrown choking the path as I choked on the joint I smoked to ease the truth that life would never be much more than this. My chain popped from my piece of shit of a bike, and I fell quickly to the pavement. Here lies death to fall right next to a dead body thrown amongst the overgrown bush. This must be rock bottom. My father screams for me to let the dog out. I knew he hated the dog. I knew my puppy was meaningless to him. Nothing like fresh roadkill. The truck came out of nowhere and my puppy bled out. This must be rock bottom. My grandma died and so did my family. My mother is now a single parent. Divorce must be rock bottom. I tried to skip a rock once. I think it hit rock bottom. And E.L. writes as part of his bio, I wrote romantic poems to the fantasy poems to humanity, intellectual poems to stupidity, and storylines with humility for all to see. And I just he's a terrific writer. So I urge you to check his stuff out.
Beautiful. Thanks, Chris. Thanks to Franklin and E.L. too for some beautiful works of art. It's much appreciated. And Chris, thanks again for joining us for Radio OPAC. It's a pleasure, as always, to get to speak to you and shine some light on the amazing work that you and your colleagues do. So we are.
Thank you so much for having me. As I mentioned, everything we do is just in service to amplify the voices of the guys who want us in their lives, and we're just so fortunate to be in that position. So thank you for all you do, and it's amazing to see all these different artists and their work being featured, just to share everything that's going on. We need some hope in these times, and we need to hear from people, and their stories. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anyone who's on the stream, please feel free to join us for the audience talkback, the connection information. There's a link down there in the comment section of the Facebook video. Chris has to jet, unfortunately, but we are going to be really pleased to welcome his colleague, Jason Kaler, who he mentioned earlier on, to the talkback. So we're excited for that. And with that, everyone, thank you again for joining us for Radio OPAC, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Stuck in our way, we're gonna make it happen, do it today.